So what we are finding today, and this is going to probably seem really weird to you folks coming from an id Software guy, is that the technological advances that we're seeing are pretty much second-order effects. We're cranking, I think the average Quake 1 scene has something like 700 polygons or something like that. And like this scene right here is doing like 5,300 triangles in the whole scene. So, it's like over 7 times as many triangles being rendered here. And, those, a lot of that's just the curves right there and the grill near the top. And this is without us splitting polygons with the BSP, so that's even worse. Imagine what it'd be like otherwise. So we have 7 times the triangles per scene. We have way more textures and things like that. But to the average person, and not just the twitchy game developers, to the average person, there isn't a huge difference between what you're seeing right there and Gloomkeep on Quake 1. So when you went to Wolf to Doom, you could show it to your mom, and she would go, "Oh my God, this is like amazing." And it's like your mom, right? There was no arguing when people saw Doom. That was something completely and radically new. And Quake was sort of the same thing. It had the light maps, these dramatic shadows, and people were like, "Oh wow, this is just amazing." But ever since Quake 1, basically we've mastered. When you're missing an entire dimension, that's noticeable. That would be the first order effect. So going from 2D to 3D was a big step. Then from 3D to better 3D to better 3D, you're just not noticing it. So you have all these things that we spend a lot of time researching and implementing, but are giving us really, really incremental improvements. They're not really helping us. They're not really like the super insane thing. Okay, so it's like, here's our little bulgy, gooey, creepy thing. And, that's a curved surface. It's using our shader stuff. We're not doing that in code. Obviously we are, but the shader for that says deform vertices using this bulge with this phase, this amplitude, this frequency. And, it's really cool. Hey, and you know what? It's got specular lighting, which you can barely notice when you're moving around it. And like fog here, you, me, we'll go, hey, cool, volumetric fog. You can walk into the fog and look up out of the fog. But you know what? To the people buying these games, for a lot of them, it's like, oh, fog, like in my, flight sim. And they don't know the difference because it's just fog. And to us, it's a big deal that fog goes up and down now. To them, it's like, whatever. It's fog. Not a big deal. So it's only really a big deal when you're the person writing it and you're really proud of it. It's like, hey, isn't this cool? It's like, oh, you didn't see that. That's our really not done lightning. Other things, does, that really, is that going to be, no one's going to look at flares and go, oh, wow, that was just like, Wolf to Doom. Granted, it's not as difficult, but, the things, you have arches. And part of this is that, people are used to seeing archways, and now that they're really curved, it's, oh, cool, an arch. The average user never actually said, oh, it's kind of weird that there's no curves on here. The developer said that, but the average user never said, oh, there's no curve here. And if there's shadows, hey, cool, shadows. But, it's really... is not one of those things that your average user really picks up on. And I realized this when people would send me email and saying, why does Forsaken run 3,000 times faster than Quake 2? And they look the same. That's not the bag on Forsaken. Forsaken's a good game, and it's a good looking game. It's a very impressive looking game. But to me, I just look at the technology and I go, well, we're doing light maps, blah, 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 blah. And people go, well, Forsaken looks just as good. And it's like, wow, people think that, and if that's the case, then maybe what we're doing that's so technologically advanced and so much better isn't really buying us that much. So, this has been a point of stress for me for a while, in that you have 7,000 triangles visible in a scene or 30,000 triangles visible in a scene, but the scenes are not getting 5-10 times better. So what this really means is that technological advances really need appropriate content. And in the old days, a few years ago, it was always, the artist coming at you saying, look, man, I've got this cool 256 square texture. Why can't I use it? Or why can't I do this in RGB? Or why can't I do this way? And, it was always because machines aren't fast enough, because the hardware's not fast enough, because no one knows how to do it, or because, I'm not that good a programmer, or whatever. It was always the programmer's fault indirectly one way or the other. Now what's happening is the curve is almost beginning to cross over, where the programmers are coming up with like really wacky stuff like, the curved surfaces and things like that, things that are really cool to other programmers. And no one is noticing. And so when you start supporting really high-res textures, you need high-res art. You need people that understand, there's going to be a greater thing about dynamic range. If your average texture is only 25% intensity, you are not getting anything for dynamic range. You need level design that maximizes the given triangle budget. Unfortunately, I'm going to be indirectly ragging on Christian, so he's going to hate me. But an example of this is, and this is like an early version of a level, so it's not really a fair thing to say. But you're running around with no mouse pad. Okay. You're running around doing things, and you're killing stuff, and you're shooting at things, and you run back here, and at no point, do you look up and go, oh, wow, there's an arch up there, and oh, wow, and like those things go all the way to the top, and things like that. So there's going to be a need to like start putting the really visually impacting things more in your face. You're going to need lighting design that's going to be far more dramatic. You're going to need, there could be an entire thing where Hollywood set designers now have jobs in, and I know it's like boo hiss Hollywood, but these are people who understand, lighting and getting it all done right so that your view is drawn to an area, maximizing depth, things like that. And obviously, you're going to need a game design that leverages the technology effectively. If it's the same game, but it just keeps looking better and better, at some point that gets, you're going to hit a wall on that. And if you innovate the technology, you have to ask yourself, how can I make the gameplay that much better? There's a potential if stencil shadows were available all the time that is going to be something that's interesting. And it's happened a few times. In some death matches, you're running, a rocket shoots by your head, you see your shadow, and you see someone else's shadow right behind you. You're like, someone's right behind me. Things like that can matter. It adds a different dynamic, say, to, water. All of a sudden, now you have transparency, so water is not something you can hide inside anymore because people can see you. Things of that nature. So what we are beginning to see is that we've gotten the low-hanging fruit. We've got 3D, we've got really cool lighting, we've got this kind of stuff. So now it's going to have to really start shifting over towards content makes a big difference. Unreal looked fantastic. And why was that? When their triangle counts were just so much lower than Quake 2's or even Quake 3's. And, it's just vibrant textures and things of that nature. So that is going to be, I think, a big problem for developers and technology people as we move forward, is having really cool technology and having a very collaborative effort with the content developers and trying to maximize the strengths and weaknesses, because you can't just provide a tool and magically expect the level designers and the artists to just immediately understand their uses. That's in the old days, that was a given, because it'd be like, yeah, texture map triangle, make a texture, make a triangle. There was like no really like key to all that. Now with shader technology and their ability to go manipulate a lot of things, we can't take that for granted, and we're going to have to spend a lot more time educating the content people on the power of the tool so that they can properly leverage that, because otherwise technology will continue to increase, but things will remain the same in terms of what they're looking at until effectively, we could end up with something like the John Carmack of artists or level designers, who suddenly comes with a whole new vision of how things need to be done and comes up with something super vibrant and super dramatic. So anyway, that's like my long-winded way of saying that technology itself does not solve the problems. It has to work hand in hand with content, and that might seem like common sense, but so many people expect id Software Games or Tim Sweeney at Epic or anyone like that to be able to come up with new technology and have stuff look radically different, when in fact you need the content that matches it, and sometimes that content's not there simply because of lack of education. So the programmers really can't be throwing code over a wall and things like that. It's going to become a far more collaborative effort in order to reach the next level I mean, truly, the next level of visual quality is going to be from having like a really cool production process where you have great technology, a great process, and everyone understands all the limitations of the different pieces. Because before, game development was a bit more of a hack. You know, it's just like, here's the technology, and you're always overcoming some major hurdle. All right, so now I'm just going off.